All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. If this is your first time here, first of all, welcome. I'm absolutely thrilled that you are here. We are primarily an interview and a commentary podcast. Today, we have a very interesting interview for you. On the studio line with us right now is Sarah. Sarah, how are you doing? So glad you are here.
Thank you so much for having me, Billy. I'm so happy to be here and I'm doing well. Thank you.
Awesome. Now, Sarah is very successful on TikTok. And on TikTok, she's at Sarah Dawn Official is her screen name on TikTok. And one of the things that Sarah is an advocate for is keloids. And we're going to talk about what those are. And we're also going to talk about the stigmas and other things that are associated with that. March is Keloid Awareness Month. Is that correct?
Yes, all of March is National Keloid Awareness Month.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's kind of start with you.
Okay.
What part of the world are you in right now?
So I am in the north part of the United States. I am in Wisconsin currently.
Wisconsin?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Oh, interesting. For some reason, I had you pictured down south.
Yes, I am, and my travel history has been very all over the place, I feel, lately. But I lived in Nashville for 13 years.
Okay.
And so Nashville, Tennessee was my home. And then my parents are originally from Wisconsin. And so I was here when I was really young. And then we moved down south to North Carolina, lived there for 10 years. And then I turned 18 and I moved to Nashville and I lived there for 13 years. So I wish I was down south for the sake of being warmer weather.
Yes.
It is cold here, but I found my way back to Wisconsin. So
I'm in Ohio, and it depends on where you're at. Winter, if you're up around Cleveland, because of the lake, they have this thing called lake effect. And a certain wind comes across there in the wintertime and just dumps a whole bunch of snow up there. We're south of that. So I don't have that too much, but in comparison with Wisconsin, which is kind of like cryogenics for the living, it's pretty cold up there.
It is so cold. And I'm literally Lake Michigan is in my backyard right now. So it's kind of like a damp cold and it's terrible. But today is 60 degrees. It's our first warm day in like a long time. So we're like, everybody is ready to run outside in shorts. And around here, people take that as a summer day. So
yes, sure. Yes. It's supposed to be pretty warm here today, so we're anticipating that.
Yeah.
Keloids. That's not something that you hear about necessarily a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard, I'm familiar with them largely because of following you. Mm-hmm. Can you tell the audience exactly what keloids are?
Yes. So basically, when I'm explaining it, I usually try to do my explanation when I'm doing it for little kids because it seems like it's the easiest way. But basically, keloids are when your brain tells your body to produce more collagen. And collagen is something that we all have in our skin, right? And whenever humans get cut or get a scar, their body produces collagen to heal that area. And so my body just tends to produce more collagen than the average person. It's a genetic condition. So whenever I scar, my scars have extra collagen, and not only that, they keep on growing. So a keloid is basically a living scar. It's a scar that continues to grow over time, even surpassing the size of the original wound, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. Now, it is not exclusive to, but it is predominantly found in people of color. Is that correct?
Yes. So it tends to show up primarily in people with darker skin tones. So and very common in Black people, for sure.
Okay. Can they become dangerous? Can they affect your health adversely?
Yes and no, depending on where. I would say yes. Everybody is different. Everybody who has the keloid gene is different, and because of lack of research and not a deep understanding of the way that keloid skin works, It really depends on, how you are treating your keloids. And for those that have, and this is not exclusive either, some people just grow keloids that just become
Hmm.
very, very large and very extensive on their own. But a lot of time, we've seen that when people go to have their keloids removed, because usually there is, pressure to do that, uh, due to the aesthetic and people, not wanting to have them, they tend to cut into the skin. Well, if you have a keloid gene and you're cutting into a scar that is already growing, it's just going
Yeah.
to keep on growing, and then you're going to intensify the situation. So there are some people that their keloids, because of, you know, constantly trying to remove them, and they grow bigger and then they want to remove them again. Well, the more you remove them, the bigger they get. And so there are some people that their keloids become so extensive that it starts to, grow three-dimensionally, not only just,
Hmm.
all over. And it can be very debilitating, and the quality of life can be affected. And so yeah, I know, I've known several people who have keloids to the extent that they're in constant pain. Some of them have trouble moving about in daily life. And so it can become physically debilitating if not managed well and understood well, and so,
Yeah.
and sometimes just depending on who you are, you can have the gene that just tends to be really, really intense, and grow keloids on their own. And we're finding now that even some diet, and there are some treatments that have been successful in managing that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
It seems like for the most part, from following you, you don't
Mhm.
seem to have those more extreme symptoms.
Right. My particular cases, I feel comparatively mild. Um, and I think some of that, and I'm not a doctor, I
Right.
just have to go by my own experience and the experience of the community that I'm a part of. I have, when I first started getting keloids, my parents wanted to get me treatment, right?
Hmm.
Um, I started doing steroid injections, which is an approach to lessening keloids or flattening them.
Hmm.
And but I stopped because of how painful doing that was. It's a very excruciating
Yeah.
process, and so, I was really young when I stopped getting treatments, and proceeded to just honestly, leave my scars alone. Um, and that has not hindered them from growing. My scars are considerably larger than they were when I was young.
Yeah.
But I really do think that the lack of, and this is just my personal observation, I find that a lot, not all, but a lot of people who kind of step away from treatment and step away from, kind of messing with their scars, seem to
Hmm.
have a little bit of a milder case.
Okay.
Um, so in my situation, mine are a lot, I think, because I've, just chosen not to mess with them. They haven't grown. They still have grown. And again, I've noticed certain foods and certain diet choices can definitely make them grow more. I've noticed
Yeah.
that over the years. So I have also been a little bit, careful, not always, of what I eat and everything like that. But as you grow older, the keloid gene, which is highly, motivated by hormones as well, seems to
Hmm.
calm down. So I've noticed that my scars have also calmed down a little bit too as I've aged. So
Interesting. And we
yeah,
should probably point out that there are
yeah,
no absolutes when it comes to the care of your body.
right,
Always be in touch with any types of changes that you notice.
yes, yes.
For example, it's sometimes almost a false sense of security that people have in regard to people of color
Mhm,
and skin cancer.
mhm.
People of color can still get skin cancer.
Yes,
Yes, it's
absolutely.
so
Yeah.
anything to anytime somebody ultraviolet light and all these things, environmental things, all impact us.
Mhm.
There are no absolutes. So anytime something makes a drastic change, there's an odd color. Always investigate.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Now you
Absolutely.
talked about they showed up when you were very young.
Mhm.
About let's say just ballpark figure about how old were you when they started to show up?
I would wanna say safe ballpark by probably about 15, I would say more
Okay.
on the age of 15, yeah.
That's an age where you're very conscious of people's appearance.
Yes, mhm.
So how did that impact your life?
Well, I was already, an oddball anyway. I would say puberty was not kind to me at all. I was covered in acne, which is where my keloids actually came from
Oh, okay.
anyway. And also I was, just I was very, very tall for my age. I was, towering over everybody else. I was probably about 5'7" when I was like 13. So I was very tall, like, and just awkward and, yeah, anyway, so for me, I I was never really shy, but when I started getting keloids, then I think I started to kind of shut down because I was very much bullied in school. Um,
Oh,
I was homeschooled most of my life, and then in high school is when I decided I really wanted some social interaction, and right at the same time, I was developing keloids, and so. Um, on top of some other issues in school, I was very much bullied and had a lot of rumors spread about me. Because kids don't understand. I didn't have
yeah.
a full understanding at that time of what I had. We weren't really sure at the time. I wasn't officially diagnosed, and um, so yeah, I was definitely bullied a lot. I was definitely, of course, I think one of the biggest things too was, family not understanding what had happened to me and, feeling disappointed. I think, and I had a great support
Hmm.
system. I mean, my parents were, super kind and loving, but they also, seeing their kid, have something that, they didn't understand. They wanted to get rid of it, I think,
Yeah.
because, of for my sake. And so, yeah, I was definitely very depressed as a teenager, and this actually led me to have some pretty severe like eating disorders and things like that because I felt like it was the only thing I could control. So, my teenage years were pretty rough as far as
Mm.
self acceptance and really just like, why do I look like this? Why do I look so different? And I grew up in a very rural town down south, so it was very people were pretty open about not understanding people who look
Sure.
different. So
Interesting. We're going to come back to that because that's an interesting part of your journey. I want to come back to
mhm.
that. Let's stay on the keloids just a little bit longer.
Yeah.
You mentioned that there are treatments available that you tried, the steroids and so forth.
Mhm.
Are there mild ways that people can, let's say, makeup tricks, creams, lessen the severity without getting involved in, obviously under the direction of a doctor, but
Mhm.
are there more mild things that people can do?
Yeah, I always say, me personally, I'm very much a believer in moisturizing your scars. I think that keloids, thrive in being really dried out, and that can worsen, I think, the effect. And so, as far as management, especially for discomfort, because that's a huge thing too, is I always recommend olive oils and fruit oils and things like that. Lotions, any kind of I suggest to people, who are not interested necessarily in oils, doing some things like Aquaphor and, just heavier moisturizing techniques that help. And I think over time do help flatten a little bit and create
Okay.
more. Keloids can feel very hard and stretch the skin, and so softening them really helps. And it kind of helps with over time keeping them moisturized. I think kind of breaks down some of that hard collagen a
Yeah.
little bit. Massage, some people do a lot of massage on their keloids. That also helps break down some of that collagen. Um, as far as people who are interested in kind of helping with appearance, I know some who are fine with putting a little foundation or concealer if they want to lessen the aesthetic of them. And yeah, I think, and then of course, like I mentioned, there are management things like diet and things like that. I know sugar can be
Hmm.
huge. And again, like you said, you have to, be aware and listen to your body and be in touch with a doctor. If you have other health things, you have to, be aware of. But I have, said, some things, and it was kind of across the board in our keloid community. It sounded like, yeah, sugar seems to be a huge, because it is inflammatory,
I see.
it can help a little bit kind of cutting that out. But I mean, I ate 3 chocolate chip cookies last night, so I,
I'm
I
with you there.
I have moments where I'm like, within balance. But those are
Sure.
kind of some of the things. I don't know if that answered well, but those are kind
Yes.
of some things. Yeah.
we mentioned stigma, and
Mhm.
stigma is something that almost always compounds any issue.
Right.
We're going to come back to the subject of mental health in a moment.
Yeah.
I believe that the perception of mental health is starting to get better. It still has a ways to go.
Mhm.
With addiction, the stigma is still very much a problem.
Mhm.
That this is something that people did to themselves, etc., without accounting for their family indoctrination, without accounting for a lot of times self-medicating
Mhm.
for mental health issues, without accounting for the overprescription of
Mhm.
pain pills. I could go on and on,
Right.
and everybody says that until it happens in their family. And they say, well,
Right.
with little Johnny, it was different. Well, it's different for everyone. The
Yeah.
path of addiction here in Ohio, which is we have a very serious problem here in Ohio.
Yeah.
The path to addiction. I'm sure there's people who have partied themselves into addiction, but that's not the path to addiction here in Ohio. Everybody
Mhm.
has a complicated story of how it's happened to them.
Mhm.
So stigma is something that is a problem there because when it comes to reaching out for help, people feel that they are going to be judged.
Right.
Okay. With
Mhm.
scars, it's a little different in that scars I associate because of pop culture with the villain. Like the movie
Mhm. Yeah.
Scarface, which I
Yes.
I, I love.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely. It's a great film.
the James Bond villain always has a big scar across his
Mhm.
face. We
Mhm.
don't see heroes. We
Right.
don't, we don't see leading men leading women with scars.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. How has that stigma impacted your life? Let's start there
Mhm.
first, and then how has it impacted other people that you've known in that community?
Yeah, absolutely. I as when I was young and I would watch, movies and things like that, I always associated with the villain.
Yeah.
When I would see the villain, I'm like, oh well, that's me. Because it was there. We're kind of saturated, just like you said, we're saturated in a society that associates scars with villains. My first scar was Scar from The Lion King. Me, a little in a cartoon.
Yes.
And um, so when as a teenager being scarred and when I understood what they were and I understood that they were scars, realizing, oh, okay, so people view me as the bad guy and ultimately are scared of me or want to do away with me in a way.
Hmm.
You don't want the bad guy in the story. And so I
Yes.
think um, in some ways, and another thing too is that when you see the villain, for those that are more empathetic, like, oh, like that's so sad. I wonder what happened to them. And then there's pity, too.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pity, and there, and kind of like either oh no, like it's such a shame that you look like this, and that we know, people got to know me. Oh, we know you're not the bad guy, but you look like the bad guy. And then you
Mm.
have people who are like, I don't understand that. That's scary, and that's not something I can associate with. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
so growing up, it was hard, and being in society, even to this day, it's still, disappointing to, only have, and not only, but, primarily have scars represented usually in a negative light. And so
Yeah.
it is, impactful, like, because if you think about it, I mean, the hero is usually the one that takes the ultimate beating in a way,
Yeah.
and in life it applies to, I think, humans in general. We experience hardship, and I think the beauty of being human is our resilience, and
Yeah.
being in a society that says, oh, you can't look like you've been resilient. That's what hero means, is to look perfect.
Yeah.
It's such a kind of a backward idea in a way, in my
Yeah.
opinion. So yeah, I would love to see that change,
Yeah.
and continue to see it represented in a better way.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't have any data to back this up, but being
mhm,
around the mental health community as much as I have been, I'm going to go out and guess that
mhm,
there is also an instinctual fear that people sometimes have. Like animals, for example, if you've ever had a dog who's, let's say, gone to the vet and he's gotten an operation and he's gotten shaved, when he
mhm,
comes back, the other dogs are afraid of him.
yeah,
It's because there's something that says there's something wrong here. This might be a
mhm,
contagion. Stay away
yeah,
from me. And
mhm,
we have that instinct as human beings as well.
yeah, mhm, yes, mhm,
So that fear that comes with that,
mhm,
Can you speak about that? Have you experienced that where people are, let's say, on some level afraid
Mhm.
of getting close?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that, people who are well, I have more of that with more younger children, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, oh, what is that? I don't understand it. Can I get that? Like you said, of, you know, fearing a contagion. And then as well as in some adults too, of just, you said it well. Oh, I don't know what that is. Is that something that can happen to me? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Or I don't understand what's going on. And I think that has happened quite often, people just not having an understanding and creating distance there because they just don't
Yes.
have an understanding. And either that or you have people just blatantly ask because they're looking at something and they're just, what is
Yeah.
that? Like, what is that? And so, yeah, it's happened to me, quite a bit. And I think that that's why it's so important to create awareness and to create an understanding, so you know what you're looking at, and
Yeah.
when you see someone with keloids or you see someone with scarring like this, you can learn how to identify it,
Mhm.
and yeah, so just like you used a great example of a dog coming home, hopefully after time of dogs
Mhm.
seeing this and repetition, like, oh, well, this is something that is normal, or
Yes.
more, becoming more common. We fear what we don't know, and
Yes.
so I think creating awareness helps with that a lot.
When I know this has to be a personal opinion,
Mhm.
so a subjective answer on your part.
Mhm.
When someone's talking to you
Yeah.
and you sense that they notice the scars,
Mhm.
um, do you feel that they should say something or just ask if it's on their mind, or does it bother you more when they pretend that they are not seeing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's totally subjective, I think, a lot of the time. I personally, I kind of have my own parameters of, and this is just me personally, because, there are other keloidals who are very different, who have different,
Yeah.
desires for being approached and or not approached. I personally appreciate. I'm really, because most of my message, and I spend so much talking about keloids, and I spend, a lot of time educating, and I love it. I don't now, where I am in my life, I don't mind if people ask me.
Hmm.
I know that at the end of the day, sometimes curiosity just will overcome someone, and it can
Sure.
overcome any social situation. I'm the same. Um, However, I do appreciate, I've found that I tend to feel more open the longer someone can hold out asking me and taking time to get to know me,
Hmm.
I personally appreciate one of the number one things that happens to me, always happens to me, especially in public, is someone will come up to me and just immediately ask me about my scars before they ask my name.
Yes.
It's kind of like this weird like pattern, I start like making tells like how many times do people, and it kind of, I think I always talk about keloid etiquette, like, hey, ask someone's name or at least kind of create a little bit of a safety net, and I don't feel unsafe, but I am always thinking too of how other keloidals might want to be approached, and I'm like,
Yeah.
feel it out, and I think, so it really is subjective. But I've also had people, in social settings who've been like, "Hey, cool scars. Where'd you get them?" And there's also a way to to kind of present that, and you can kind of feel that out. And I learned how to kind of, you know, navigate. Where if someone is being rude or they're generally just excited and want to know. But I personally, I kind of just go with the flow. But I do like when people, hey, what's your name and where are you from, and get to know you a little bit. And like, I'm just curious,
Yes.
where'd you get your scars? And that's totally okay. But I tend to feel, I mean, I had a friend who knew me for like a year and never asked me. Like they never asked me. They just, it wasn't really important to them. And they were like, okay, I don't understand what I'm saying, whatever. And I think it was a year later before I felt safe with them, I think, because there's also that of like, okay, this is not something that, dictates their ability to become close to me. So there's
Yeah.
also that. But on the educational side of it too, I do like being asked because I like, the opportunity to share.
Yeah.
So it's kind of subjective. So
Sure.
yeah.
And I'm sure a lot has to do with the respect that someone comes to you with that question,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to, typical type of conversation you would have in a bar, let's say, where somebody's trying to be funny. That's probably not the best way,
Yeah.
yeah, to approach to approach the Met. Um, y- y- I'll ask you this because I know you've been asked this on your TikTok account.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And it has to do with what society deems as an attractive person.
Mhm.
Okay. You get compared to a certain movie star every once in a while.
Yeah, I don't even understand it. Yes,
Okay. And Angelina Jolie.
I do.
And I'll tell you what happened to me. This is a true story. This was about a week or two ago.
Uh-huh.
I'm going through the Dunkin' Donuts window, the
Yeah.
pickup line. And this older woman, and I say older because typically there's teenagers there. This woman was retirement age. She was probably, working there, for extra money or what have you. And she had a little bit of a southern drawl.
Yeah.
And she looks at me and she goes, "Did anybody ever tell you look like Saul?" And I'm like, "Saul? Saul who?" And she goes, "Not Saul, Saw, the guy from Saw."
Oh my god.
So you get Angelina Jolie, I get the guy from Saw.
They're both actors. So
So I kind of played along with, "Oh, you have two choices."
no. I've never seen the movie, but I know who you're talking about. I've
Yeah.
never seen the movie.
And actually, since that happened, when he was younger, I can see the middle-aged guy, long hair, the resemblance. Now that he's gotten older, I don't look like him so much. But anyway, you do have a certain, let's say, flair that someone else who let's say that society doesn't deem as the most attractive person in the world to begin with, now they have the scars.
Uh-huh.
Is it harder? I mean, I'm presuming the obvious answer is yes. And
Mhm.
what advice would you have to them?
So, and again, I, I have my own pretty like firm ideas on like, beauty and beauty standards and all of that. And, I just kind of, I'm just very much personally, it's hard for me to answer because I'm like, everyone is just, I just want everyone to just to be, but when you're not, I guess you're asking like if someone is not being compared to a celebrity and they're kind of
Yes.
just, when you feel like you are in the standard of being an average Joe, whatever that
Right.
means. Yeah. Um, again, I think it is. Again, it's the biggest thing is connecting. I think and finding a connection with what makes you different,
Yeah.
and being able to connect with that, rather than I think people treat looking a certain way as a destination and as like a means to an end when just being human and learning how to be you and where you're at is the beautiful part and is the journey, and so I have many people come up to me like, oh well, I don't, have said things like, oh, I don't get compared like to this, or I'm just, or they're
Hmm.
in different stages in life, or
Yes.
and I, I always, they're like, how are you, it's easy for you to be, people have said things like that. And I'm
Yeah.
just like,
Sure.
you know what? I don't even think it's confidence. And I just said this the other day. I don't think it's about being confident or having the tools to be confident, which some people think is having certain elements that fit into our beauty standards and our beauty, and
Hmm.
society's idea of what is acceptable. I think it's just learning how to be vulnerable and coming to a place of connection with yourself and connection with the things that make you different. If it's keloid scars that you have, how can I connect with this, and building a relationship with your scars?
Hmm.
And, and then I think that that's from the place where you grow and you start to have a sense of rest. And the thing is that I was always an awkward child. Into my 20s, I did not have really a flair. I was
Yeah.
still trying to, I was not anyone to be noticed or, and on top of that, I had scars. And I think a lot of it too is, you know, there's something to be said about when you have an inner rest that takes time to get, especially when you have something that is challenged all the time
Hmm.
by society. And you start to build a relationship with that place and that thing and start to fall in love with this thing that makes you different and accept it and embrace it. There's something that happens, I think, and a flare that kind of sets in where people are drawn to that,
Yeah.
and drawn to vulnerability. I mean, you could be, I mean, let's say just the farthest thing from what society thinks is attractive and have a sense of self and a sense of, you know, hey, I'm okay. I'm disconnected from standards and I want to be connected to myself and be the hottest thing, walking
Right.
around. People are so drawn to that. And I think, you know, that's something that I love to see is people, that's where I'm drawn to people is like, wow, that's so attractive. Not because you meet a beauty standard that is very boring and constantly changing.
Yes.
I mean, some of the beauty standards we have today were like completely non-existent 55 years ago.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answered your question well, but I always say, you know, sometimes the focus can be like, oh, what I don't look like, and how can I feel beautiful or feel accepted with this
Right.
thing. And I think the first thing you have to do is, if you're willing and able to connect with that first, because and learn how to, I have women and men,
Hmm.
everybody being like, oh, I hate this about me. I hate these scars. I hate them. I hate them. I hate them. I hate them. But I want to be confident. I'm like, well, the first thing you have to do is you don't have to love them, but you have to create a relationship, I think, a healthy
Yeah.
connection, and find purpose somehow, whether you remove them, whatever you choose to do. Um, and, self-hate can not only repel yourself from you, that's the
Hmm.
most important thing,
Sure.
but it can also, create, I think, walls around,
Hmm.
the energy can be, repellent as well. And I say that gently, that sounds like, oh, you have to love yourself or no one will love you. That's not true at all. Or you have to feel beautiful or you're not going to be beautiful. That's not true either. I think it's just learning how to connect with yourself um, kind of trying your best to kind of detach from some of those unhealthy beauty standards. And they're real and they're there. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But I think it has to start with, you first,
Yeah. I like the fact that, people like Brad Pitt and Angelina
Mhm.
Jolie and all that exist. I enjoy looking at them.
Right.
I enjoy seeing them on screen. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that.
Right. Right.
However, we do sometimes, and maybe it's subconscious, we do place those types of individuals as the standard that you have
Right.
to attain.
Right.
This is why you have to go to the gym and work out. This is why you have to buy the makeup. This is why you have to do all the other things.
Mm.
Instagram and all these other things, especially for teenage girls who are, very impressionable, has oftentimes set a standard that they are not going to be able to attain and probably should not try to attain. I'm very happy that there's been a push to have more diversity with models, not only with
Mm.
ethnicity, but with weight.
Mhm.
Okay. Uh, Being pencil thin isn't always associated with being healthy, and there's
Right.
other things that are attractive.
Right.
There was a model recently I noticed that was accepted that had Down syndrome.
Mhm.
Are we are we getting close to the point where there's going to be a supermodel that has scars?
Man, I hope so. I hope so, and I think, and like, you say this, and it's just a great reminder too to be like, we are. I feel like we are very much moving in the right direction, which is,
Hmm.
especially someone who has scars, is so incredibly encouraging. And we just had, and it's interesting because we just had another keloidal person in the keloid community, who I love, who is a model, and she was just featured on a Dove commercial.
Oh wow.
And all of us when we saw this, and she has a pretty extensive keloid scarring, and this is the first keloid model that's ever been represented on Dove ever, and honestly, in any commercial, to my
Yeah.
knowledge. And so I really do, and that was just, and it just being able, having the privilege of knowing her, and like you said, seeing so much diversity and body diversity, it really is moving forward. So I'm really hoping that, you know, um, that there will be a scarred model someday, and that there will be, I mean, I have huge dreams for like scarred Disney princesses, and
Yes.
and even just scars that are presented in the media and in movies when they are on a protagonist, that it's not just this beautiful little, like a Harry
Yeah.
Potter scar where it's just perfectly this beautiful little design, but the gnarliness, for lack of a better word, the gnarliness of it all is also, something that I want to see presented, and show the beauty of that too. And so, um, it's, I think that, just like you said, like having your Brad Pitts and Angelinas, as the, this is it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that changing, because it's such a small, like 2 or 3% demographic of people who look like that, really,
Sure. Yeah.
and it's also a certain era deciding what is
Hmm.
just the epitome of beautiful, when 100 years ago the Angelina of the time looked totally different,
Oh,
and
sure.
so I really hope that just the fact that being human and having your body and having normal bodies that do normal human things, be represented, not even just scars, but like you're saying, continuing the trajectory of, not having your pencil thin, not having, people that haven't been through life, or all of that. And I really do think that it's heading there faster than I ever thought, I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy. And I'm happy about it.
All right. Let's hope that it is. And I
Mhm.
really think the message of embracing your scars is something that we don't hear a whole lot about. It's all about plastic surgery,
Yeah.
get rid of them and this and that.
Yeah.
And there are certain people, if they've been disfigured in a car accident or whatever, that's part of their recovery. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But then there
Right.
are other times when, there's nothing wrong with embracing your scars, embracing
Mhm.
what has, helped make you you.
Yeah.
I think that's a great, great message.
Yeah.
Let's touch a little bit on mental health, because that's a recurring theme in this podcast. You mentioned that
Mhm.
you went through a time when you were very badly depressed,
Mhm.
and you seem very well adjusted now.
Thank you.
Um, I'm sure that was a journey.
Uh-huh.
What was the moment that you turned it around? How did that happen?
Um, well, it was definitely, I think, a span of time. I think, like I said, you know, very depressed as a teenager, extremely. And up until my, 20s, part of the reason is when I moved to Nashville, I was a part of a couple religious organizations, and I ended up being in a community. I moved there for music, and was a musician, and I was working with other musicians, and part of it that helped was also my environment of people that were very accepting of me, which was
Hmm.
very new for me, at the time.
Sure.
I mean, I grew up with kind of being this like unfortunate happenstance in some ways, and my friends loved me and all of that,
Hmm.
but being in an environment where I was just surrounded by people who didn't care, and they were, focused on, you know, other things, was a huge help. Um, but also, I think there was a huge turning point, and I was about 22 years old, and I had gone to an event where someone was talking about how scars were sinful, and how, and it was just it was a crazy situation where, and then this person knew me, so it was like, a very and again, not trying to make it a religious thing, but in, I think, the American Christian church, scars are also compared to being, having body differences are very much shamed in that place, and I was a part of that for a long time. And so having someone publicly make this whole, speech about, how if you have scars, that means you're not healed and there's something wrong and you're not, and sinful. And,
Mm.
and I remember that moment, um, going home and being like, okay, like, I've been living my life, as well as I can. I've been trying, and I've been focusing on music, and I was working in, communities and helping my community and things like that. And, doing a lot of work. And, I lived in the inner city, and it was just like really
Right.
downheart, being like, I've been doing everything right. I feel like, why are people saying, why is
Yeah.
this idea that scars are so sinful? And it pushed me to this deep, deep place of depression, probably in that moment, the deepest I'd ever been. And I remember just kind of asking this question. I'm like, okay, well, if I'm so bad, if being scarred is so bad, then why am I, why isn't this taken away from me, or why isn't this fixed,
Mhm.
And I remember hearing this inner voice, you can call it whatever you want it. But I just remember hearing this voice that said, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. What if I took all of this away? What if this didn't exist?
Mhm.
What if this wasn't here? But are you willing to see what your life would be like if I did, like if I didn't? If there was, if this divine thing couldn't come and take these scars away, what would your life be like? Are
Yeah.
you interested to see what could come out of your life?
Yeah.
And people can take that as they will. I'm pretty open, about that. But I was like, I don't know. Can this be a good thing?
Mhm.
Could this be a good thing? Could this be something that um I could make beautiful,
Yeah.
somehow? Could this be a beautiful thing in my life? I started really asking that question because everybody was saying this is ugly, this is not okay, this is bad. And it kind of pulled me out of this moment of like, this doesn't have to be ugly. Who is saying this? Why are people deciding this? Why
Mm.
are people demanding that scars have to be so bad, when everyone is doing it. Everyone scars, whether you scar on the inside or scar on the
Sure.
outside.
Mhm.
This is a human thing that we're all doing. But for some reason, because mine are so visible, and so I just had this kind of like, it really was. I was just sitting in my room and it was really a
Mm.
moment. And so after that, I was like, I don't want to apologize for this anymore. I don't want to miss out on my life. There were
Mhm.
so many things I wanted to do. There were so many places I wanted to see and go. And I really did feel before that like I had to hide, or that I couldn't be seen. I couldn't be loved. I couldn't be in. And I just, in that moment, was like, I'm not doing that. I just don't want to do it. I just won't. And I'm very stubborn. And, my resolve doesn't come often, but when it does, it goes deep. And so that was the moment. I was probably about 21 or 22, and I'm 33 now. And I have been doing that for the last 10 years, of just being like, okay,
Mhm.
like, how can this be a beautiful thing in my life? And the first thing I had to do, that I started doing, was looking at myself in the mirror and looking at my scars
Mhm.
and trying to connect with them somehow. And
Mhm.
how can I connect with you? And I started having moments where I'm like, you know what? Of all of the things in my life, these have been the most constant. And
Mhm.
of all of the things in my world, these have been always faithful to my story,
Yeah.
um, and then when I started doing it online, people started coming to me, and with, people who thought they were the only person who had keloids in their whole world. So, that started that depression of feeling like I don't fit, I don't belong, I am
Mhm.
excluded from the rest of the world, started to shift to, I can create my own world. I can create my own sense of self. I can't rely on the outside world to do this for me. And how can my pain have purpose? Because it had been so painful.
Mhm.
And again, I still, now I've gotten older, and I've been through divorce, and I've been through all kinds of stuff. And,
Mhm.
there's still moments of reality of the chemicals in my brain of with depression and stuff like that. I still have to navigate through those moments, and I have pretty hard crashes
Yeah.
sometimes. But when it comes to my mental health concerning my aesthetic, because it is such a huge part of our mental health, if wanting to feel like we fit in, and we are, that our shell is appreciated. There's something about
Absolutely.
it, and
Mhm.
so as far as that, that's always in process too. But I feel like, I have grown to really love this shell, because it keeps all of the stuff that's going on within me safe too, and so
Yeah.
I think that was probably the moment, when I was like, okay, you know what, I just have to, I don't know, I just want to see what my life could be like
Yeah.
if I lived as a scarred person and loved it,
Mhm.
somehow. And so I don't know if that answered it well, but
That's a fantastic commentary. I just love it. You have a very powerful spirit about you.
Mhm.
I'm sure that's one of the reasons why you are so successful on TikTok. The only thing that I would add is when it comes to mental health,
Yeah.
is don't be afraid to get help. There's a lot of times when, if you fall and you hurt your wrist, you go to the doctor.
Yeah.
If you have something happen in your life, you spiral into a cycle and you talk about the imbalances in the brain. There's absolutely no difference.
Right.
There's no reason
Exactly.
why you shouldn't reach out for help.
Okay.
There's a lot of community resources available now, depending on where you live. They're just a Google search away. And a lot of times they won't come at any cost. Sometimes there's people working in the social outreach department that will help you get you covered with insurance or something else. So there's a lot of reasons to come forward and get the help that you need.
Right.
So that's always the message that I want to get across. Depression sometimes can become very serious. It can get into a situation of self-harm. If you feel that someone that is in that situation, say something.
Yeah.
I know the general fear is well, if I say something, will that make them want to do it? Well, if they are genuinely considering harming themselves, they've already considered it. And saying nothing. Every study on this has shown saying nothing is 1,000 times worse than saying something, and you should do it correctly.
Right.
You don't want to say, "Oh, you're not planning on killing yourself," or you don't want to say that, but you want to say something like, "Hey, I noticed that you're acting a little off. You don't seem yourself. Is there something that you need help with?" And that can save someone's life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how you've overcome that and your warrior attitude when it comes to self-awareness and your attitude about scars. And I think that's so important to change the attitude about scars. It was on my radar to some degree, but following you and finding you on social media really brought it out. It really made me much more acutely aware of the situation than what I have been before. And I would very much encourage people to find you online. You are on, as we said, you're on TikTok, Sarah Dawn Official. Is there any other place online you'd like to direct people to?
Yeah. I am on Twitter now. And so you can find me at Keloid Dawn on Twitter. And then I am on Instagram as Sarah Dawn Official. The same as my TikTok. So, and those are besides TikTok, those are the two places that I've been hanging out. But yeah.
Okay, great. Just let the audience know you are enormously successful on TikTok. Tens of thousands of followers. And I only mention that because here again, it would be easy to say, well, pretty face. But I got to tell you, your spirit, it transcends that. And what you're doing in terms of attitude is much more important. And boy, I'll tell you, the work you're doing is much needed because the attitude around scars and how we accept them really has to change.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Sarah, for being on the podcast. It's much appreciated. It's been a joy having you, and you're welcome here anytime. You know that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. This has been so special for me. So thank you. Okay. I'm so happy to be here.
All right, great. I'm Billy Dees. You can find me on Twitter. Real easy to find on Twitter at Billy Dees. That's kind of my social media home. You can tweet me anytime. You just have to be nice. That's all I ask. It's okay to disagree, but you just have to be nice. And in my Twitter bio, there's a link tree there that pretty much has all of my main little places on the very fine internet. And you're welcome to engage the podcast. We are available just about on all the major podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and also Goodpods. We want to shout out to the good people over at Goodpods, a great place for independent creators. Thank you very much for listening to our podcast today. And for Sarah and myself, thank you. And we'll talk to you again next week.